So the main questions were, how does compassion at work affect workplace incivility and positive emotions? What are the possible effects of compassion, reduced workplace incivility, and increased positive emotions in the workplace? So the study included a total of 304 participants from 15 companies, all located in Seoul, South Korea. And all participants were to respond to a survey that had measures about their workplace compassion, positive emotion, positive leadership, and workplace incivility. So the scales were questions, about do you feel that compassion happens in your workplace? Do you feel that there are those who act in workplace incivility? And sorry for a little bit of the background noise. And questions like that, do you experience positive leadership? So a lot of it was based on their personal experiences and their feelings in the workplace. So if you can go to the next slide. And then all of the results were obviously put through data analysis. So they showed that when compassion is found in the workplace, there is less likely to be workplace incivility. And compassion also tends to lead to positive emotion, and positive emotion tends to lead to positive leadership. And where there's positive leadership, there's also not likely to be workplace incivility. So, and positive emotion and positive leadership were also seen in this study to be mediators for the relationship between compassion and workplace incivility. So they all kind of affect each other in some way or another. One of the key takeaways was that workplace incivility hinders open innovation. So they find that obviously, and it makes sense that if your coworkers are rude to you or you don't get along well, you're less likely to collaborate, work as a team, and also have the environment that allows innovation to take place in a productive workplace. So understanding how to reduce workplace incivility will be really helpful if you want a good working environment and you want innovative staff. Positive leadership also has a positive impact in the workplace, and it can reduce and prevent workplace incivility, and it also encourages that same atmosphere for innovation. And where there is a positive working environment, compassion and care amongst colleagues, and positive leadership, there tends to be less workplace incivility, more innovation, and an overall better functioning organization with better teamwork. So a lot of it, I think, is common sense, but I did find the study really fascinating. And they do mention that a lot of different studies have evaluated certain factors of this, but not necessarily how all these pieces work together, and how that also ends up impacting innovation, which I thought was a really interesting outlook on that.
Yeah. Did they measure innovation?
So they didn't measure innovation itself, but taking from other studies and what we know about an innovative workspace, and this was, I think, in the Journal of Open Innovation, which is why there was a focus on that. But they do pull from other studies that show that those kinds of things hinder innovation. So if you can reduce it, it's just the logical implication that you will see more of that because of it. But it wasn't necessarily measured, no.
Well, it's a nice, clean study. How did they measure compassion?
They measured that through the questions. So it was just a questionnaire that everyone responded to.
They had like a validated compassion scale. Okay.
Yeah, that they used talking about, whether they agree with the statement or disagree. And they do mention, this was evaluated in, specifically Korea. They did have a variation of companies, and they had a variation of people that they interviewed from those companies, from executives to just low-level staff. But that was one of the limitations, as they mentioned. It would be good to better understand how this might be influenced in other parts of the world, in other industries. But overall, like you said, very clean. I like the outcomes from it.
Yeah, to me, very straightforward. However, it leaves the unanswered question of, okay, so how do we enhance compassion?
I was just thinking that. So what's the intervention? What's the intervention look like?
Yeah.
What's the compassion training look like? Yeah.
And I know that's not the focus of this article, but that's just like where it's taken me.
Yeah. Well, it's an important question. Now I think there's plenty of research to show that compassion in the workplace is a positive thing. It leads to more in collaboration, less incivility. So then the question is, what interventions work? I wonder if there's some intervention studies about like compassion interventions and with some pre and post tests.
Yeah. I mean, we know that contact theory is proven, right? So just having interaction with different folks.
And I wonder too, I mean, I think, as they talked about with like positive leadership and how that can help minimize workplace incivility, I imagine if there's, less of that to begin with, you probably are able to be more compassionate if you're not in a workplace that has that. Like you'll probably bond better if there's not a lot of incivility between you and your coworkers from the get-go. So I think some of that has a lot to do with your leadership and, the atmosphere that they set for you. But specific interventions, yeah, I think that's really interesting. I just read another study today actually about compassion in like a post-conflict society. I mean, it's definitely becoming more and more studied and how we can try to enhance that for people. A lot to be understood yet though.
Yeah, I'm looking online if there's like workplace compassion training. I'm seeing, I don't quite see like training programs, but it might be interesting. I mean, just to kind of look at like what they're measuring to like what the validated scale measures, and then like taking those measures as the goals, and like how do we increase like to those goals, and then you could use those same scales to do the pre and post test to measure. I mean, probably be a good thing to offer, a workplace compassion training.
Yeah, this is reminding me of just something I heard in the discussion I went to last night around DEI initiatives, and it was just talking about how basically doing the evaluations and like the testings to prove if like human behavior has changed or if like the initiatives are working is very hard to track and to gauge, like social sciences, in that department. So something like compassion, very, very difficult to, I mean, it's human behavior. It's very complex. We're all different and it takes a lot of time to change those things. So having a study to try and evaluate that and like prove it, not that it's impossible, it's just very difficult, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best maybe we could do, I mean, there's different ways of probably measuring it. We'd have to use a validated scale, but then also maybe there's some observational type of things. I don't know. It'd be
long-term scale.
Yeah.